We are back. It's another week at Rosie's Review as part of our financial literacy series, 5 o'clock finance. And again, we're joined by Brionna, who is now our pretty much like in-house CFA. You know, I haven't made the formal offer yet, but it's getting close. And this week we're really going to be talking about investing, specifically the difference between passive, active, and kind of everything else on that spectrum. And so thank you for joining us. For those of you new, Brionna is a CFA, an MBA. She has more acronyms after her name than anyone else I know. So she's really here to provide us all the financial expertise to help us get a little bit smarter and a little bit better. So let's dive in. All right. Let's just start with, you know, what is passive versus active investing? Because we hear, oh, make passive income, blah, 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 all the time. Like, what does this actually mean?
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up because passive is kind of just like thrown out there and it can mean a lot of things. I think in this context, we're talking about, you know, I have X number of dollars saved up and I in like a Fidelity account or something, and I want to invest it into something out in the market.
Right.
So taking it from that perspective, there's a difference between active and passive. So passive, for this perspective, is like, you know, I'm going to buy an ETF or an exchange traded fund that invest in the S&P 500. So when you see like the Dow is up or the S&P is up, like you're going to be getting that exposure by buying this exchange traded fund.
Got it.
The opposite side of the pure active perspective is like I'm going out and I'm buying Apple, Amazon, Tesla, or whatever. You're doing individual stock selection.
Got it.
I'm not recommending these. I really have to put that disclaimer out there because I haven't done the diligence on it. But the reality is like this active versus passive debate is so like a either or, black and white, when the reality is like there's a spectrum.
Okay.
So, you know, little by little, it can be more and more active management, and it's not black and white. This is the way that like a lot of these conversations end up sounding like, especially when they're conveyed to the public. Okay.
So really, you can kind of fall anywhere along that spectrum, and so it's not one or the other. Is there like any argument on both sides? Because I've heard like passive versus active. Do you feel like they're at war with each other? Now that I know that they're on a spectrum, shouldn't it be a little bit less one or the other? I mean, how do you see it?
Totally. I feel like that's such a great comment to bring up. So like passive is like characterized by, you know, there's not a manager individually like picking what you're going to be buying.
Okay.
And so you pay like a small fee for the management of the fund to get exposure to, like in this case, like an S&P 500.
Got it.
On the opposite side, in active management, if you're paying for, you know, an exchange traded fund that's actively managed, you're paying a management fee because you're paying that manager to use their, you know, the letters at the back of their name, like the CFA or whatever they have, to use their expertise to pick this like securities that they want to invest in, with the idea that like you're going to have a better return in the active management because someone's going in and saying like, well, this one is undervalued in the market right now. Like, I think this one has the best growth potential to go up. So the debate has been very heated, I would say, lately, because since I don't know, I want to say 2008 or at least 2013, passive management has done better than active management.
Whoa.
Right? Which is crazy. So like basically what we're saying is that like just riding the market is better than having somebody go in and say like, this is undervalued, it's going to go up more.
Wow.
And so like that's why it's like, is active management dead? Like, is passive management taking over or whatever? The reality is like there are cycles. So when you have like a business cycle where everything's going well and, you know, we're on an upward, you know, momentum or whatever. Yeah, exactly. There's like this saying of like all boats rise with the tide.
Right.
And so like if you're in a passive fund, you didn't have to pay for them, like the manager to like actually pick something, but you got the benefit of riding up.
Right.
Now, active management has historically done very well, you know, in a downturn.
Right.
Just because like
the tide isn't rising, so
exactly
needs to just be watching the waves and seeing which one you want to try and ride.
That's a great way to put it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
And like yeah, that's it.
All right, that's really interesting. I didn't really think about all that, but how do you know which one is really right for you and where you're at? Some things that I'm like thinking about, well, if you're paying for active, it's probably expensive. You have to hire someone like you with a CFA and y'all aren't cheap. So thinking about really which one is the right fit and how do you make that determination?
Yeah. So I would say from like being an individual, you need to have a portfolio perspective. And so the idea is that like, okay, I have a pot of money, right?
Okay.
And so it doesn't have to be all passive or all active. Like there isn't this either or that like the media portrays that there is.
Right.
There can be opportunity to be a part of both.
Okay.
To like have, X% to passive, X% to active. It's the same thing with saying like, I want this much money in the stock market, this much money in the bond market. Like you
Right.
have to look at it as like, this is my pot of money, like what works best for me.
Yeah.
The idea too is that like you need to align it with your goals and the time that you have available. So I know some people who have been very successful stock pickers who individually go out there and pick securities and they've done well, but that takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of expertise, and so you have to realize what aligns with your goals and like your capacity to execute this.
Right.
So I wish I could give you like a better answer of like, yeah, put X% here or whatever.
But it's different for everyone.
Exactly.
And someone who can sit there with their money invested for 20 years, versus someone who's like, I can only put this in for 2 is going to be looking at totally different options.
Yeah. The other thing I want to bring up is that the stock market seems like a scary place, particularly where it's like the Dow is down by this, the S&P is up by this, or it's hit this many points or whatever. Like it does sound pretty intimidating. Yeah, totally. And like, you have these big funds out there with all this money, like doing stuff, and like it can seem very confusing. But I would recommend just even like a rudimentary like understanding of like, what's the S&P 500 or like what's the bond market or whatever, like can guide you to invest, and have your money investing is very, very powerful rather than putting it in gold and putting it under your mattress.
Yep.
Your cash won't build with you if you leave it just sitting there.
Yeah.
And that lends to like, let's say you save money forever in cash. I mean, I wouldn't think is very realistic right now, but I mean, the cost of living goes up every year. Like inflation goes up every year, so that money actually depreciates every year.
Right.
If you don't have it invested in something that can like rise.
It's growing.
Exactly.
Wow.
So it's like you need to beat inflation to have made more money. So I mean, although the stock market can seem like a scary place, like absolutely first like build up 6 months of savings, etc. But I do recommend that like you take a look at it and don't put it off. I had a roommate who had like a lot of money sitting in cash because she was so scared and didn't understand how the stock market worked.
Yeah.
I'm not saying be reckless and invest in whatever, but like take the time to at least get a high level understanding and put it in something that you understand.
Even
as you
if
build.
it's just growing with the rate of inflation or just tracking the S&P 500, at least it's moving upwards with the economy versus, like you said, sitting there depreciating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's a great tip. Well, I think that's it for this week.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us, Brionna, and thank you for joining us, listeners. And we're very excited to be back next week where we will be talking about retirement.
Ooh.
It feels far away, but it's going to come fast. At least that's what my parents say. But I don't know, I still feel young.
I mean, it's 2020. The weeks are going like that.
I know, it's crazy. All right, well, thanks for joining us all. And again, feel free to leave us comments or follow along. Let us know if you have any questions, and we're happy to answer them. Okay. Later, y'all.